Hello there. Welcome to another episode of RICO'S Garage. I don't believe you've all met our newest acquisition. Well, this here is my new to me daily driver slash backup tow vehicle. Yes, I still have the Cummins. No, it's not going anywhere. The time came to replace my daily driver, the 05 6-liter gasser, and I decided if I was going to replace it, we're going to replace it with a diesel, and came across this one. So let me get out of here. We'll do a little walk around and I'll tell you why I bought this truck and why it's in the shop. So give me a minute to get out and we'll go from there. Okay, now that I got everything situated, here's the deal. Like I said, the 05 6-liter gasser Chevy needed replaced. The Indiana winters had just about taken its toll on it. Still ran and drove great. However, the rust had eaten through to where the cab was literally ready to fall off. It was time to replace it. I decided if I was going to replace it, I wasn't going to buy another 6-liter. I was either going to buy an 8.1 or a Durmamax, with Durmamax being my first choice. I test drove a couple different trucks, and right now is the totally wrong time to be buying a vehicle because what I looked at was absolute garbage for a high price. And then came across this one. Actually, a buddy of mine found it when he was working out of town. He was like, hey, you got to go check out this Durmamax. So I did, and I bought it. I didn't get a great deal on it, but with today's market, I paid a fair price for it. We'll just leave it at that. And the reason I bought it at a fair price is I bought it as is because it has some issues. Some I don't really care about, some we're going to fix. That's why it's in the shop right now. With that being said, let's get into it, see what we got going on, what we're going to fix. This truck is obviously the Duramax diesel. It's the LB7 designation, which is 01 to 04 if memory serves me right. One of the main reasons we got a decent deal on this truck is it's got a problem. Anytime randomly on cold start and what seems like relatively frequently on hot restart, this truck will fire up, run for a few seconds, like long enough to fire up and maybe say put your seatbelt on, and then it just dies. You have to come out here and pump this primer bulb a few times to reprime the system, and then she'll fire right off. You won't have any problem. This is relatively common on Duramaxes across the board, and while I didn't get the whole story from the dealership, basically the last straw was they've tried to fix it 2 other times, and this last time the tech told him it needed injectors. I don't believe this truck needs injectors. Now it may down the road because it's a Duramax with 163,000, and if they haven't been changed, eventually it may need them, but right now I don't think it does. But there are some things to these Duramaxes that need repaired, and looking over it, I've noticed this truck needs these repairs. That's what we're going to do today. That's what we're going to show you, and we're also going to do a couple of upgrades. Now what we're going to take care of today is this filter head that I just showed you. It has some O-rings in it that tend to go bad, and it's, I'm going to basically say a maintenance item on these Duramaxes. They use this style filter with the primer bulb, if memory serves me right, clear up till 2016. Again, this is an 03. There's a few O-rings that wear out and cause an air leak. Anytime you get air in the fuel, that's going to cause it to lose prime, which is one thing this truck is doing. So we're going to pull that off and rebuild it. We're also going to do an upgrade on the fuel filter itself, which I'll talk about. And then we bought a line kit, which I'll show you here in a minute, for these return lines that come from the fuel injection control module to the filter head to this test port here. And I'll show you, these lines have a bad habit of weather cracking, dry rotting over time. I mean, after all, this truck is 18 years old, so things are going to start wearing out. There's also if you look here, and I believe this is the main culprit with this truck here. I'm zoomed in. There's a fitting right here by the alternator. This is actually a test port. Like if you were having an issue with your fuel injection, something of that sort, they can plug a tester in here and test the fuel pressure. We pull this cap off. Not only are you going to see there's a Schrader valve in there similar to like your air conditioning or normal gasoline engine fuel injection, but you can also see there's fuel there. It's leaking fuel and you can see the air bubbles. So that right there, combined with the dry rotted hoses, the worn out O-rings, it's no wonder this truck's having the problem that it is. In fact, it's almost surprising it doesn't have any worse problems. So what we're going to do with that, I'll show you. We just bought a cap that we're going to thread this test port off since we don't need it, and we're just going to cap that off, eliminate it altogether. Here's a brief rundown of what we're going to use to repair and upgrade our Durmamax. First of all, the fuel filter O-rings that I spoke to you about. I bought this kit at the local O'Reilly's. It's a Dorman 904 124 HP. Open this up. Show you here. See, there's several different O-rings, some screws, and the bleeder plug is brass, whereas the factory one is plastic. You can get this either way. You can get it with a plastic or a brass. It wasn't that much more to upgrade to the brass, so that's what I did. Well, we've got that head off. We're going to replace the fuel filter with a cat filter. This is a higher micron, higher efficiency filter. It's not a direct fit to the Duramax. I'll explain that once we get it off. Also, while we're upgrading, I got this PPE boost valve. This goes in line on the turbo wastegate, holds the wastegate closed just a little bit longer. It actually fools the wastegate to thinking there is less boost present than there is. That's going to help our turbo spool up a little more, give us a little more boost, which makes a little more power. It was cheap, it's easy, we're right there. We're going to go ahead and do it. Also, from Lincoln Diesel Specialist, and none of this stuff was sponsored. I bought all this stuff with my own money, guys. They make a kit that has all of the return lines for the Duramax, the LB7 specifically. Here you go right here. You can see OEM complete LB7 fuel return line kit, 2001 to 2004. Their part number is an LDS 200-104. It's all repackaged. Not even repackaged, they just throw it in a box. It's all GM OEM stuff, but to not have to go through all the trouble of finding all these part numbers and ordering everything, you just make one call and they ship it all to you. It's well worth it. So that's going to take care of our dry rotted return lines. And then there's a company I believe is called Dirty Hooker Diesel. I found them on eBay, I believe. They make the cap that does away with the test plug that I showed you earlier that was leaking. We're going to put that on there too. There's all your parts. I'll explain everything in a little greater detail once we get it off the truck and work on the sub-assemblies. For now, let's get everything apart. Let's focus our attention on the engine bay and start getting some stuff apart. So, here we go. Okay, first things first. You'll notice in your OEM application you have this big resonator up here to help control intake noise. It's the black plastic piece that says 6.6 turbo diesel. On the LB7, it just sits in here in a rubber mount and pops off easily. What I have done is I've removed this and took a 2-inch Fernco quick cap. You can buy these at, I bought this at Menards. You can get it at any home improvement, plumbing supply, whatever, for less than $2, and plug that off. You can search YouTube and the internet forums and everything. They talk about, you know, the LB7 resonator delete cheap mod, blah blah blah. It's supposed to make your turbo a little louder and a little difference in performance. Sad to say, I'm glad it only cost $2 because I didn't really feel it. It doesn't sound any louder to me. The performance, I'm going to say negligible at best. Eventually I would like to get a different intake for this, but right now we're just focusing on repairs. We'll do the upgrades later. If I can get some kind of a cold air intake, it might make this thing sound a little bit more like a diesel is supposed to. It's even got the factory exhaust on it right now, which I may deal with that later too. I haven't decided yet. There's the skinny on the Durmamax cheap resonator mod. I was going to do it in a separate video until, to tell you the truth, I was so disappointed on what it didn't do that I'm not even going to waste time. So I mentioned it. If you want to do it, have at it. For me, I don't know. You can't be too upset. It was only $2, but I believe where I'm going to start is getting this intake out of our way. Let's unplug that. I think if I just leave that loose like that, that's going to give me enough room to sneak out of there what I need to sneak out of. Oh, don't tell me it's not going to come out that way. Sure it will. Okay, we have our filter head removed from the truck. I know you couldn't see very well when we was removing things from the truck, so I'm going to point a few things out. Here is where the fuel hoses were going, with Satan's little invention right there. Those are getting replaced. Here's where the sensor hooks on, and then there's a ring terminal that goes on one of these Torx head bolts, hooks on there. Here's our bleeder screw. Again, that one's plastic. The new one in the kit is going to be brass, so I'm going to start by removing that. Somebody way over tightened that. Somebody probably suspected that's where the air was getting through, and that's why they over tightened that. Oh my. Wow. Way too tight. Okay, we'll remove that. Now we'll remove our 3 Torx heads. There's a little spring tension on here, so just going to hold down while we thread our screws out. Keep everything from flying into oblivion. Okay, pull that out. We'll take the spring, set it aside for now. Our retainer plate, set it aside. If we pull off our primer button, you can see our two O-rings. And if you note, they have a bevel to them. One is pointing up, the other is pointing down. We're going to want to make a note of that. I grabbed me a couple picks. First thing I'm going to do, take this O-ring off the filter housing, discard it, rub some diesel fuel from my gloves onto this O-ring, work it down on there. Set that aside for a moment. Now we're going to grab our plunger assembly. Remembering that the top O-ring goes up, the bottom O-ring points down. Work that off there. Discard. Okay. Rub some fuel on it. Work it into place. Make sure it's seated good, which it is. Again, that one went down. This one's going to go up. Work it in place. Double check just to make sure. Doesn't go that way, dummy. Oh yeah. It's gonna make a difference. Considerably tighter. It's going to seal a lot better. Okay, spring goes back in. Spring in place. Start a screw. Gonna leave that one loose because that's where ground wire went. Start another one. Apparently we have a bulb on its way out. Okay. Going to install a bleeder screw. Nowhere near as tight as the previous person. That concludes that side. Now we flip it over, remove these two T20 Torx. Give that a little wiggle. Comes out. We have an O-ring right inside here that we're going to replace. And an O-ring down here that we're going to replace. Make sure you didn't lose your check ball while you had this apart. Otherwise you'll be very irritated when your truck doesn't reprime. That's it. One rebuilt filter head.